Well, welcome to our Q3 public safety update. If you've been to these before, you will notice the format is similar, where we have some new information, some new strategies, some new programs that we'd like to talk about, but also want to share some of the data that you've come to know and be used to in these updates. So I know a couple of you, this is your first one, so I want to go over about the purpose of these quarterly updates. It's to provide a high-level view of violent crime in each quarter. That's always a big interest point for people, so we want to give kind of a state of how things stand in terms of violence in the city. We're going to talk about some strategies that the South Bend Police Department is implementing and have implemented to help reduce violence in our community. And we want to share some information about some upcoming events and some ways that our community can get involved. So we're just going to go ahead and go through the data, strategies and programs, events and engagement. But first I want to let the important folks here at the table introduce themselves, give a couple opening statements, and then we'll dive right in.
Hello, I'm Dan Skibins. I'm the Assistant Chief for the South Bend Police Department. I'm also a Division Chief, and I have the Operations Division. You'll get to hear about some of our strategies from myself. I'm also overseeing hiring and recruitment. You'll see some slides upcoming about that.
James Mueller, Mayor of South Bend. As Ashley mentioned, this is the same format that we do in these quarterly updates. Just a couple things to highlight before we get to the numbers themselves, but we've seen a substantial decrease in crime and violent crime in particular since the pandemic peak over the past couple of years, and thankfully that's continued. This year, the month of June, was a particularly violent month in the city compared to others. And so outside of June, thankfully, you'll see in the third quarter, we got back to the trend of a decrease of violence especially from a couple of years ago. So that's the good news. Another piece that we haven't necessarily, we talk about it every time, but we haven't highlighted it to the same extent as other things because there's been so much going on. But we're at full staffing levels. We're continuing to recruit, so pretty stable in terms of bringing in new hires versus those officers leaving for retirement or whatever other reason, life opportunities elsewhere. But the piece that we haven't highlighted as much is really where we are in terms of the diversity of our department, and that's something that there were a lot of diverse hires made many decades ago, and in the 2010s we saw the numbers drop rather substantially as those officers reached retirement age and left our police department. And over the past 4 years, the team has done a great job, not just replacing officers when it's been a difficult hiring environment and retention environment across the country, not just replacing officers, but making sure that we're making progress to have a police department that represents the diversity of our community. And so, we may be slightly down from our peak. Some of these, one officer leaves and it changes the percentages. But as a whole, we're well above where we've been, especially over the 2010s. So we've made a substantial amount of progress over the past few years and really appreciate the effort. So in terms of the new officers coming in, we're doing well above the national average in terms of percentages, and we're continuing to make progress to meet and exceed the national averages in terms of underrepresented groups. So those are kind of the two big highlights that I have, and I'll turn it over to Chief Ruszkowski.
Yep, Scott Ruszkowski, South Bend Police Chief. The mayor put a bow on it, so there's really absolutely nothing that I could add on to anything that he stated. So I'll just give a shameless shout out to Shay. She was a special recognition commendation winner at the South Bend alumni this a day and a half ago. So just a shout out to you, Shay. You could interview her afterwards. I'm sure she wouldn't mind not giving you.
And Captain Jason Biggs. I'm the captain over the Detective Bureau and also oversee the crime lab and some various other units. But mostly oversee here and talk about the violence and the homicide investigations.
All right, so let's dive right into a couple announcements off the top. As many of you know, because you were here earlier this week, we have launched a hurricane relief supply drive to be benefiting the victims of the hurricanes in the southeast. So that started on Monday. The drive started on Monday, and it started just as kind of a conversation between a couple officers, and it has blossomed, and I believe that is an understatement. After today's press conference, I will invite you to follow me into the garage and see how those donations have grown even since you were here. I believe it was Tuesday. It's probably quadrupled, if not more, since then. So really big shout out to our community and coming together and helping those who need it most at this time. As the victims of Helene are still reeling, and then Milton, that's kind of an uncertainty at this point because it just made landfall yesterday and overnight. So our community has really come together. So that's until Friday at 11. So tomorrow at 11 p.m. when our lobby closes is when we will take our last donation. Those officers and firefighters plan to leave sometime this weekend or potentially early next week to take those items down. They just have to figure out what kind of vehicles they're going to take to get down there with all the stuff we have. So we encourage people to keep donating via just coming into our department or McKinnis Realty in Mishawaka, as well as through our Amazon wish list. Also, a big item coming up is Cops and Goblins. That's up on Tuesday, October 29th. This year it's going to be at the Century Center. We've been blessed to have a great partnership with the South Bend Cubs over the last few years to use Four Winds Field. However, stadium renovation is making that venue unusable to us this year, so we are thankful to the Century Center for stepping up and allowing us to use their venue for Cops and Goblins. Unfortunately, all tickets have been claimed at this time. They went quicker than they ever have. Usually we have tickets all the way up until when the gates open. This year we were sold out in 3 days, less than 3 days. So a lot of interest in it this year. Maybe it's because we don't have to worry about the rain inside, but very excited for that. And those still wanting to get involved, we are still accepting candy donations because that's a lot of candy for 7,000 people. So. Moving right along, Fall Citizens Academy. We had our graduation this past Tuesday. About 30 people are now official Citizens Police Academy graduates. If you are interested in being in the academy, we will have a spring academy, and we will release that information in June.
Camille was president of the class, I believe, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, she was.
So-
Yes, Camille
Honorary.
was she was president. So shout out to you. No. And then lastly from me, and then we'll get over to the folks at the table. Right after Halloween, we will shift to our holiday giving season. So that's really largely thanks to FOP Lodge 36 and their Santa's Officers program. Generally, applications for that program will open on or around November 1st. And that is interested families can apply, and they will receive wrapped Christmas gifts hand-delivered by South Bend police officers in the days leading up to Christmas. So again, those applications will be open in November. Each year they help hundreds of families with gifts and food and whatever else they need, clothing. So just be on the lookout on social media for those updates. But with that, we will go into the rest of our presentation. Thank you.
Uh-oh.
All right, I'll get us started with our usual slides, hiring, recruiting being that first slide. As the mayor talked about, our staffing numbers have stabilized. Over the last 2 years, we've had stable numbers in the 240s, even into the 250s at times. So as you can see on this slide, we're at 247 currently. That's sworn police officers. The 4 that is listed above there, those are 4 individuals who are recruits. They are at the police academy right now. They are scheduled to graduate from the academy on November 15th, and we would swear them in the following week. So you'll see our numbers jump up to 251 in November. Along with those 4 swear-ins, and all 4, I am happy to report, are doing well at the academy right now, showing no signs of having any difficulties graduating on time. We have 2 lateral officers who are sworn in the state of Indiana that will also be sworn on the same week in November, so our numbers will jump up even further to 253. We've had 5 individuals either retire or resign from the South Bend Police Department in this past quarter, and that is also reflected in the 247. You can see a snapshot in that last portion there. 241, that was the highest that we were at over a 5-year period of time. So when we started having these about 2 years ago, giving these quarterly public safety updates, we wanted to show you where we were at and trying to build back to that height of 241. We've now exceeded that. We've stabilized mostly in the 250s for most of this year, just dipped here in this quarter with a few resignations. And so I look forward to getting back up in the 250s and even growing from there. And on that note, I'll jump to recruitment, and this is a snapshot of our diversity. And the mayor talked about that a little bit, and I can go back even further and discuss in about 5 years ago where these numbers were, and our African American was at about 6.5. It was less than 7% because of some retirements that occurred. Our females, we only had about 5% females on the police department in that same time frame, and then Hispanic was just slightly above 5%. So it's been a build back over the last 4 years for us, and for the entire department. Our staffing had dipped all the way down to 209 officers. So when we looked at what do we need to do to get back to where we were, several elements went into that, from salary increases to hiring bonuses, officers who were recruiting here also receiving a bonus for recruiting someone to come in, hiring a new PIO, as Ashley just took to the mic earlier to talk about special events, utilizing her skills. And so advertising the police department, coming up with commercials that would air on TV, and keeping in mind while we're doing that and preparing how we want to recruit and build our staffing back was about diversity, bringing back African American officers, female and Hispanic, so that our department can reflect the community as best as possible. That is still a priority for us, and it will still continue. And each year, when we start to look at what do we need to do for next year to build upon that diversity that we keep increasing, we make subtle changes because we don't want to plateau, so that it's always a priority for us. What can we do? Which officers can we utilize from the police department that are diverse? Sending them to colleges, sending them to recruiting events, just getting them out there on the streets and talking about what it takes to become an officer and building that interest. So it all continues on a daily basis here. And I think this is the chief's portion.
Yep. So some data review. Those who have been here are accustomed to this. Others not. Jot down your notes on your papers or ask the questions afterwards. But if you just simply look at the snapshot itself, it'll give you a great perspective. So the gun violence incidents are down quite considerably. The criminal assault or the CAS shooting victims were only 2 less in comparison to last year in this quarter, but that's still 2 less. So again, not zero. I wish it was. And I think notably you'll see a significant increase in illicit guns that we've recovered quarter-to-quarter comparison. The next slide is, again, you can look at it and see for yourself. Most notably on here, we've had 6 shooting fatalities this year. That's half of what we had at this time last year. So, again, these are notables. These are things that people tend not to focus on. When there's one, it's drastic, and rightfully so. There's a tragedy involved, obviously, with a family, friends, a neighborhood, and an entire community, including our police department. So we're obviously heading in the right direction. 0 would be the perfect direction, and someday I hope we get there. I think the media had asked before about the group member involved. You see that we've added the percentages that we know that we can confirm there was group or gang member involvement in those criminal assault shootings. The next slide is something that was asked for, I believe, at the last public safety update. So here it is. I will let you look at it. Hannah did a great job of pulling that information based on the stuff that we had and putting in perspective that we all would understand, primarily me at first, and especially if you had questions about it. But that was one of the things I think was a sticking point. Camille, I thought you had asked last time about the juvenile thing, but actually there was more than one, but I think you were first to ask. So there you have those numbers. We can elaborate further afterwards if necessary. It'll be based on questions if you have them afterwards.
All right, when we look into the death investigations, for this year to date, we've had 10 death investigations. And as the chief alluded to, we had 6 of those were fatal shootings. We had 1 fatal stabbing. So a total of 7 murder investigations. 6 of those have already been resolved. And we're coming to a conclusion on the one and only open case that we have this year. Switching to Crime Stoppers. Crime Stoppers is a vital role here in the community, and we lean on our community for these tips. As you can see, through year to date or through August, Crime Stoppers has paid out over $65,000 in just rewards and tips. 9 of those cases were victory over violence. That was a new rollout that Crime Stoppers came up with a few years back to elicit some of those community tips, and it's paying off, as you can see. A total of 242 cases have been solved just this year alone from Crime Stoppers, and that is up from last year from 237. The arrests are also up, 190 arrests just through tips through Crime Stoppers compared to 176 last year. And again, the biggest thing is to harp on that $65,000 that they've paid out this year. That's $10,000 more than what they paid out this time last year. And that goes into the Crime Stoppers event. Crime Stoppers has 2 shredding events each year, one in the spring and one in the fall. And the fall shredding event is coming up next Saturday. It's going to be held at the Southgate Crossing. If you're not familiar with it, it's the Big Red Farmers Market off of the bypass in Elkhart, off of State Road 19. And from 8 to noon, they'll be out there. You can come out there, shred all of your important documents that you don't want anymore with a $20 minimum donation. But you can also pay a little bit more. And they really rely on those donations to pay out those community tips, as you can see. And I can't express any more than I have, just how important that is through Crime Stoppers and our partnership with them.
All right, moving on to mental health calls for service. This is something that I asked for quite a while ago, and we've gotten, at least from the South Bend perspective, gotten really good at documenting these. These are known, vetted incidents of a mental health related crisis issue. So whether it's a formal report, informal but documented, or we call in the crisis team, or whatever it may be, anything that is mental health or episode related to mental health, we've documented those through the help of our PSAP Center and CAD. So it's between 350 and probably 420 seems to be our average. But to date we've had over 28,000 mental health calls for service. So they have expanded the hours with the mobile crisis team and the intake center from 8 to 8. So we're doing 6.5 days a week that we found. So we're still trying to work on some of the later hours where the resources are much less community-wide, during the 2-3 a.m. hours. The next slide, traffic enforcement. If you remember the last quarterly public safety update, you saw a down or a red numbers. I saw the eyebrows raised at the last one, including mine. So we made some internal changes. We still have our traffic units assigned to each shift, and some extra traffic patrols on top of that. And then on each shift, even more helping out with traffic related issues. But you see that it's a huge increase, 31%. Notably, survey results, community input, internal results all had gun violence and dealing with that as number 1, and traffic control and enforcement as number 2. So, from council members to public safety, you name it, mayor's office, because they get the complaints just like we do, sometimes more on some things. And this is one of those where the complaints have constantly come in, and we've made, you see the daily average is about 43 traffic stops a day. Those are only outside of a call. So if there was a hit and run, for example, and then we made a traffic stop on the hit and run vehicle, that is not counted. These are outside of, these are self-observed traffic violations that occur. So that number is quadrupled when it comes to those traffic stops if they were included.
I have the next 4 slides. All right, license plate readers. As with a majority of law enforcement agencies throughout our country that are our size or larger, we utilize license plate readers. The company that we utilize is Flock Safety. We've had a contract with them for about 2.5 years now. Happy to report that the success that we've had with license plate readers continues. You'll see that on the next slide, and I can go over a few things here with you. For this quarter, there's been 33 cases that have been assisted by license plate readers. That has us on pace for our average over the last couple of years, about 120 cases a year. License plate readers are utilized. primarily by our investigative division. So just to give you an example, if we've had a shooting in an area and we have partial information, such as a red vehicle was seen fleeing the area, we have analysts that can get on to those specific LPR cameras in the area and see if any red vehicles crossed the path of that camera in that time frame. And that helps us also eliminate suspects. It's not just to help generate suspects, it's a very important tool to eliminate possible suspects. Another thing that we gain from having flock license plate readers would be with Amber Alerts. You'll see statewide alerts go out, and those are immediately updated into a state database that if a suspect license plate is out for something such as an abduction, if that plate were to cross one of our license plate readers, and we have 45 of those throughout the city, then our officers in the field get an immediate alert on their laptop in their patrol vehicle. So we can respond to that area, and the officer also sees a back picture of that vehicle showing the license plate. So we can immediately begin looking for suspects in crimes right off the jump. We don't have to wait for information to come in and then a boatload to go out. That oftentimes would happen an hour or two later for investigations. We get a lot of that immediately, and it's due to our use of flock license plate readers. We can now jump to the next section, which is ShotSpotter Connect. For those of you who are unaware, we have this technology through ShotSpotter, the company, and we utilize it for resource deployment. What it does, the computer generates for us areas for patrolling, and they're small areas, generally 2 to 4 blocks in width, and just general, about two blocks in width, two blocks in diameter. And so these small areas are generated due to trends, crimes that have been committed. So any reports that have been filed about criminal activity, that's pulled daily through this ShotSpotter Connect system, and each patrol shift that comes on gets assignments in those zones. What that looks like is the officers are required to spend 45 minutes in each zone per shift. So we're not asking officers to spend all of their time there. We're not trying to have some type of takeover where law enforcement that presence is so that's all you're seeing is law enforcement driving up and down the street. We're having a deterrent. We're having officers out there, we're giving them an assignment, and they also see why that assignment was created. Was it burglaries to garages, or was it robberies to persons that occurred? The officers see that right on their computer screen, so they have an idea of what to be on the lookout for. And it's a huge deterrent for us, and it's been successful. On the next slide, I think we've already jumped to it, you can see that the buy-in is there from our police department with ShotSpotter Connect. We've also utilized that for about the same time frame as Flock, which is about 2.5 years. And with 99% mission completions, those are the actual patrol areas that I talked about. Before we move on to the next few slides, though, I do want to talk about ShotSpotter and something that you'll see in the future at our quarterly public safety updates is the title change for these slides. ShotSpotter did a rebranding a little over a year ago. They became Sound Thinking. That is the name of their company now. They have a suite of law enforcement products, about 4 of them. ShotSpotter is one of those products now through Sound Thinking. And ShotSpotter Connect, also with the renaming, is now called Resource Router. So in slides upcoming in the next quarterly public safety, we'll be changing these titles. The reason I didn't change them immediately is because we had only been with them for about a year, and gaining buy-in from law enforcement officers when we have technology changes that seem constant anymore. I didn't want to go changing the name and have officers unaware of what we're even referring to, talking about in our internal meetings, requesting them to complete the missions. They are now called Resource Router Patrol Areas, so you'll see the change upcoming.
Okay, we are reaching the end of our presentation. Before we open it up for questions, I just wanted to touch on a couple community engagement events. Many of these we already had discussed, but the deadline for hurricane donations is going to be this Friday at 11. We have Cops and Goblins coming up on the 29th, Century Center. And as a reminder, the second Wednesday of each month at 6:30 are our community crime stat meetings. We actually just had one last night, so that'll be coming up. Next one is November 13th. So we will turn it over now to questions.
If you want to think about some questions, so October 31st is Halloween. I'll be making a plea to the board to approve the hours for trick or treat for Halloween, October 31st from 5 to 7. it's come up in the past, it's come up every single year of why are you making these earlier hours? People have to work, etc. The reason is, as we move further into the fall towards the winter, it gets darker and darker earlier, and we want to do whatever we can possible to maintain visibility on the kids running from corner to corner, house to house, and yes, from across the street between parked cars. So whatever we can do to help that, that's what we're going to do. If neighborhoods want to get together, building complexes get together and extend theirs inside that, have at it. That's fine. That is our. That will be my plea to the board to approve the 5 to 7 p.m.
This quarter, we had the school social media threats. I know that's happening nationally, but specifically at Washington and Adams here. So how do you guys discern if they're credible or not?
We have great analysts.
Okay. So they just look at different social media and videos that are coming out and...
It's a little bit more complex and deeper than that. They communicate with other analysts from throughout the country and our federal partners as well. But we were on that. I mean, it was immediate and earlier, way before school started. So this was something that we discovered after working with our federal partners throughout the country, that we were not alone in this. It was...
Yeah, because I think some schools, it was real. So some students got charged at some schools across the country, so.
Yes, but, yes.
That's why I'm asking, why do you, because in some cases it can be, so.
It's what we take every threat credible. We saw a lot of copycat out there. We also saw a lot of Snapchat sharing or social media sharing the post that really blew it up across the nation. So, but like Chief said, we worked with our partners, with our federal partners, and incorporated our analysts, and we were able to sort through what was credible and what wasn't.
And I'm glad you asked that, Camille, because that was a very good question, because people have said, well, the police kind of just blew that off and didn't. No, we already did our research, we did our homework, we did our communication. We also, yes, people did see squad cars at some, but what they didn't see is detectives who don't have marked squad cars, undercover officers who, so these are things that people don't see, we don't advertise, but we had, for specific threats, although vetted and we were confident, we still took measures that we needed to take just in case.
And Captain Biggs can probably talk about our SROs in the schools and their knowledge of what goes on a daily basis.
Yeah, we have 6 SROs, and they're in our middle schools and high schools. They're well versed on their student body. They interact with them daily. And so as these threats come through, we can kind of sort through them. We lean on our SROs to be able to not only interact with the school administration, but then also interact with the public or interact with the students to kind of calm that rise down to stop the sharing of the social media as well. So.
And then you guys put out a release that you're looking for a shooting suspect from Elm, Oregon. Is there any kind of update on the process or if he's been located yet?
He's still outstanding. We're still looking for him. I think Crime Stoppers is probably pushing that out, and we'll push it out again this week. So he shot a young lady that for absolutely no reason, and we want to hold him accountable for that.
That's what the probable cause affidavit says.
Yes.
Yes.
And then last question, I wanted to ask about the new LVT cameras. Do you guys roll those out at Fusion Fest, and just how the process is going, and if you're liking them, if they're helping?
Well, Dan can get into further details if you need to, but yeah, absolutely. I've used them. I can tell you that I have immediate access, if necessary, to those, and I use them, not just at Fusion Fest, but other places in the city. So this is a trial basis right now to see how, if it's compatible with us. To date, I have not received any. Matter of fact, the opposite. It's been accolades from people in the neighborhood, businesses in the neighborhood that are much appreciative of being able to do that. Now, our camera partnership program with businesses and residents would be a heck of a lot more helpful, but we'll do what we need to do in the interim.
What do you think is helping when it comes to gun violence? What do you think is helping reduce those numbers?
not being facetious, but yes, everything. So you have the external and internal communication. I mean, you have parents that are stepping up. You have teachers. You have administrators that are stepping up. You have things that are programs and strategies from the mayor's office, from the police department, from the school corporation, from our parks department. So, before everybody did their jobs, but it was siloed jobs. Now we've gotten to a point where, they're cogs in a gear, and we need each one to turn so the gears keep running smoothly. The machine is smooth. So that's one of the biggest thing right there. And then, hopefully people start realizing, pull that trigger, it's done. You don't get to do that. And that is absolutely life and death in that 1 second or less decision.
I mean, there are groups. I mean, as you see, the majority of the gun violence is driven by groups, and we have a group intervention strategy, which is engaging the known shooters, the ones who are driving the vast majority of the violence. So if it's a one-off, guns are everywhere, unfortunately. If it's a one-off, those are hard to get on top of. No matter, we can't come up with a strategy to be everywhere at all times. But when it's focused on the folks that are driving a vast majority, that's where our efforts are, both on the engagement side. So the mantra of group violence intervention is, we will help you if you let us, we will stop you if you make us. And obviously on the second part, that's the law enforcement, that's where law enforcement comes in. And you'd put our numbers on solving homicides, compare our numbers to those around the country. And it's important to be able to hold those violent actors to account and get them off the streets. Because, like I said, a large portion of the violence is driven by a very few small number of individuals.
So we see for juveniles that they are at 15.1% for criminal assault and shooting victims.
Mm-hmm.
How can we lower that number? Is your department doing anything to help curb that with juveniles?
Again, to the mayor's point, people tend to think of this as an adult-only strategy, which for the bulk of it is, but we've taken further steps to include our Juvenile Justice Center, some of the programs and strategies that they have within there. Our school system itself, I mean, we have, I'm not talking about just the SROs, but we have officers who were on our police department that are in the South Bend Community School Corporation that understand what the GVI strategies are, and to implement some of those or some ideas from those into the kids themselves. So there's a multitude of things and measures that are being taken with, SAVE outreach, when you have specific personnel, like we have violence prevention programs at O'Brien Center, and they will often interact daily with juveniles, not just in school, but for out of school curricular activities. And those they got to be helping. You look at the number, any number, like I said, above zero, doesn't matter, adult or juvenile, is not a good thing. But when you look at those, I know it all seems like, oh my gosh, it's that's always been the feeling throughout the community, and statistically, that is not the case. However, one too many.
And I mean, you got to keep guns out of kids' hands. That's first and foremost, and that starts in the homes that they're in, encouraging parents and guardians to keep their guns locked up and not accessible, but also on to what we can do in terms of our policies within the state of Indiana to collect guns that are being carried illegally or swapped illegally. So that's a big part of it, reducing the access to firearms, keeping them out of the wrong hands. I think most of us agree children shouldn't be able to bring guns to school or school events or outside parks or outside curriculars. But so far we haven't had the will collectively to take the full measures we need to make sure that they can't do that. So, but that continues to be a focus with the existing policy today to do what we can do to keep guns out of the wrong hands.
Any other questions?